we're back with the Space Coast Real Estate Show. Another quality episode brought to you by all of our friends here on the Space Coast, including myself, Jesse Hall with eXp Realty, John with Move It Mortgage,
LoanApplyApproved.com,
and Michelle Carpenter,
Inspiring Home Staging and Redesign.
That's right. And together we are the Space Coast Real Estate Show. Thank you so much for joining us. And as we fade out, we have our guests in the studio. This is our first guest. We haven't really had guests in the first few episodes, so this is kind of exciting. And today we're actually going to be talking about something that I believe is still on a lot of homeowners' thoughts. I mean, especially if you're someone who's sensitive to our ecosystem and things of that nature. We're welcoming Jake. He is the manager of the conservation manager with the Brevard Zoo. Brevard Zoo I just noticed, guys, they were recognised as a sixth best zoo. I can't speak today. Sixth best zoo nationwide.
Love Brevard Zoo. We love it.
Mm-hmm.
Brevard Zoo is it's a great facility.
Kids, so.
Yes, and of course the kids love it. Big kids at heart love it.
Yep.
Likewise.
If you haven't been in a while because of COVID, go back, because we just went last weekend and they've added a lot of new exhibits.
They do have a lot of new exhibits.
Yeah.
I really
going on.
Yeah,
always.
I enjoy the kangaroos.
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah, the kangaroo
The
exhibit's
giraffes.
always fun. You like the giraffes? Or
look
Jake and I pre-show were like, how are the giraffes just like breeding? It seems like there's always like a new baby
Because they're happy.
over there. Yes, they are happy.
They're happy.
And so
cared for.
we're exploring
It's
why
spring.
animals in
that too.
captivity may procreate more than other breeds, and it's just because they're happy. They have the land. They have the generous venue.
They have full bellies.
So yeah, I mean, I
No
think
predators.
I think everybody
Stressful.
exactly. I think everybody and I'm not sure how many tons of lettuce they eat, but all I know is every time I go, I serve a bushel to a couple of them, and that's probably one of the most fun things you'll ever do, because you're like 20 feet up off the air, and these guys are just like reaching up, and they got these tongues that'll just come and wrap.
Probably as much lettuce as I eat.
Yeah, right. A full romaine in one gulp. Like anyway, we really love it. And it's more than that. The zoo does so much more for us here locally. They have a couple other projects. I'm not sure if Jake's going to be, have the liberty to talk about it. But they are so involved. And we're just so over the top to have Brevard Zoo in the house and talk about what's going on, not just conservation wise, but also zoo wise. So Jake, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been there and why you love the zoo?
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me today.
Mm-hmm.
The zoo is happy to be in Brevard County. I mean, we're a community-built zoo.
Yes.
That's really part of our DNA is being built by the community and
Exactly.
keeping those ties in the schools and with our local families. So it's been a wonderful opportunity for us here in the last 26 years that we've been in the area.
And how long you been with them?
I've been with the zoo for 5 years. So
Wow.
I'm Jake Zender, conservation manager with Brevard Zoo.
See, you can spit it out better than I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
I'm
I
so
say
glad.
it all the time. So I love the zoo because we obviously have this footprint, and people come to have this experience with animals in a really intimate setting where they
Right.
can get close, and the exhibits, the habitats feel very natural. But we have this public face that people see a lot, but we also do a lot of conservation work locally and internationally. And I think that's something that guests are kind of maybe vaguely familiar with. I do think we had a period there for about 10 years where every elementary school kid in Brevard County made like an oyster mat, like
Right.
at least once,
Right.
sometimes 5 times, depending on if the teacher was really into it. So we did have these little touches in the community in some of our local conservation work. But we also have a portion of every admission and every membership goes to international and local conservation projects where they come to Brevard Zoo, which is not a huge facility in
Right.
terms of national zoos. And we've, putting our money where our mouth is and giving money to other organizations to do good work all over, from the Florida Wildlife Hospital here in town
Right.
to groups in Madagascar and Borneo and India and all over the place.
I mean, you guys rehab hurt manatees, sea turtles, You guys are always releasing something back
Yeah.
into the ocean. It
The
seems
turtle
like there's
crawl.
yeah, so there's always. I mean, it sounds like there's always something in the news regarding Brevard Zoo in one way or another.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we try and fill whatever the local need is, and that's really the origins of our conservation story.
Right.
Is there were opportunities where they needed help, and
Right.
we stepped in to kind of fill that role. And the Sea Turtle Healing Center is a great example of
Right.
that. In that, the Sea Turtle Preservation Society and other groups were having to drive like 100 plus miles sometimes to get to a facility.
Well, the nearest
for
one's like a
rehab.
SeaWorld.
Yeah.
You know.
And then there's one way further south, like Gumbo Limbo, way
Mhm.
down south. And so we, got the community together, and we got a gracious donation to build a
Yes.
world-class veterinary center and, sea turtle rehabilitation
Mhm.
facility. And now we do a bunch of sea turtle releases.
Yeah, John, Michelle, any fun memories of the zoo with the kids or anything else?
Well, yeah, I got 2 kids, so we'd love to go to the zoo and
Mm-hmm.
as often as we can. And also they have the zip lining there
Yeah.
too that we
The-
we enjoy.
The treetop.
The treetop
Tree
track.
track.
That was
That's the tongue twister.
that was new.
Yes.
Like that's only like what 4 years old?
I think it's a bit older
It's
than
a
that.
little
Is it really?
I
older
would
than that.
It is.
It's actually
say-
10 or 12.
I was going to say it
10
was
or
around
12.
2011,
Uh-huh.
2012. I
feel
think
real-
it got
not-
finished. Yeah.
I feel even more guilty for not enjoying it yet. Have you guys done that?
I
I have
have.
not.
I even did
Well-
the
You have not?
black diamond.
What the
My
black diamond?
son,
Yeah.
I have twice,
You have
and I
twice?
work there, so
Right.
I should go more.
Right.
Apparently.
we first moved here in 2010, and my son was in 6th grade. So that summer, he attended one of the camps that they have for the school-age children during the summertime. And so he was able to go canoeing, and they did do the zip line, but he was still a little shy at that time and did not. So he did not participate with that. But it's a great opportunity for the kids during the summertime for the zoo camps. I'm assuming y'all still have those. I think I saw some
we do.
advertisements on that.
In person and virtual,
And
if,
virtual,
if that's your
cool.
speed.
Yeah, so he was really, that was our first, we just moved to Florida, so that was really a good introduction to Florida wildlife and things like that too. So
Yeah.
that's a great thing for people moving into the community.
My
their
daughter's
children.
school goes there every year on
Yeah.
like a field trip, and I
Yeah.
always tell my baby girl to let me know because I want to be the chaperone.
Yeah, we're still doing some night hikes with the education department, so you
Nice.
get kind of the zoo after dark,
Oh, yeah.
and of
Those
course
are
summer
cool.
camps and things. Yeah, it's a totally different experience, obviously, because there's plenty of nature that just is on the zoo property that is not. It's not under our care.
Right.
It's just the owls and snakes and turtles and everything that are just kind of hanging out on the property.
Speaking of that, does that have any? I mean, there's no gators eating any of the zoo animals or anything like that, right?
No.
Okay.
So we do have the odd gator get in from the
Right.
wetlands adjacent, but it's the
yeah.
little guys.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
they hang out for a few days, and then we catch them and put them back somewhere else.
Escort
Yeah.
them back.
Yeah,
Um,
nothing big enough to be concerned about. Your,
No,
your safety is okay.
I
when
hate
you
I hate
kayak.
to imagine like an owl would just like grab a meerkat.
Yeah, and
Ooh.
you fly
Like
away
that'd
with
be great. Like
That's why they have the lookout.
yes.
They have that one poor sacrificial meerkat who stands up tall and looks
Mhm.
around all day
Yeah.
for
Really?
the hawks, because that's one of the big predators out in
Wouldn't
Africa.
that be weird?
Yeah.
It's
it. I hate
like-
to have that job.
Yeah.
Isn't the meerkat enclosure covered most of it,
Uh,
or is it?
I thought it was
It's
partially
it's
open.
open air.
It does have
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
open air.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew there were some
Yeah.
parts of it that.
The
maybe-
part where guests are is undercover. The parts
Okay.
where the meerkat are
Okay.
open.
Right.
We haven't had any issues.
Good. Kids, it's okay. No
Yeah.
meerkat has not been harmed in this podcast.
Yeah.
Which is surprise.
We don't want to
Surprising.
sing the Circle of Life song.
You're right.
It's like, oh, it's African species. It does tie with Lion
it
King.
does
Yeah.
tie, yeah.
Yeah. No, we try not to do that.
Now, and you guys do have like other theme nights. You guys have like a jazz night. You guys have all kinds of other things. Talk about
Ye-
some of those.
Yes, so those will be coming back around.
Mhm.
We took a pretty big step back, as you'd imagine, during
As
COVID.
as with everybody.
Yeah, everybody experienced this. You can talk about it with everyone because everyone experienced
Right.
it. But yeah, so Jazzu is going to be
Jazzu,
coming up
yes.
if we do it at the same time of year, November.
Right.
So that'll have a couple different musicians,
Mhm.
bunch of local vendors for food,
Right.
and drinks, and it's a super fun event. We scaled it quite a bit back, but I think pre-COVID we were probably around the 1,500 to 1,600 people coming for a one night.
Nice.
It's
Bonanza,
always
yeah.
on everybody's list to do.
Oh, it's a party.
because
it's a good time.
it's part gala,
Mm-hmm.
but it's at the zoo. And again, it's music, so it's a concert. So
Yep.
it's like all those things, and that's one of your fundraising opportunities,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah. The big fundraiser is Safari Under the Stars.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the one that's more
Yeah.
the gala feel. It's
Right.
it's get dressed up, nice table, plated food, all that fun stuff. So that one we just did virtually. That's usually around April.
Right.
Man, if our development department here's me quoting the wrong dates, I might get in trouble, but I'm pretty sure. So that one's big corporate sponsors and local businesses that are just super generous and support the zoo, and a great opportunity to have some fun. And we usually have an awesome special guest, whether it's Jeff Corwin a few years back, or Jack Hanna, or Tony Stewart, from NASCAR.
Yes.
Whoever it is, we get somebody fun. Yeah.
Yeah, people love the Brevard Zoo. I mean, the Brevard Zoo, I think, is of all the people who, are, have any kind of philanthropy, and they have the means to give back. They give to the Brevard Zoo over a lot of other local charities because of all the work that they've done, and because they just love the facility. They love to be a part of it. Brevard Zoo gives back in so many different ways with education and so forth, and again, conservation, which we're going to talk about. Because you're here, and this affects the residents of Brevard County as well. When we talk about the Life Lagoon, and I don't want you to become, we get the MRC and other professionals in here to talk about the Life Lagoon, but it's an issue, and it's a big issue. We just passed a tax not too long ago. We're constantly seeing the dredging from all the muck and everything else being reduced. We're constantly hearing about, the conversion from riverside properties that are within a certain distance from the river, trying to be converted from a septic to now go into a sewer kind of thing. So there's a lot of improvements that are going on, but I think one of the biggest things that people don't realize is the importance of oysters and other bivalves and mollusks and everything else, and how they filter the water. And again, we know the answer here, but what is that ambition, and how does Brevard Zoo play into it?
Yeah, so covered a lot of ground. So,
yes, I know.
So this is the great thing about Brevard County, is that we've really taken hold of the situation and are doing our very best to address it.
Right.
So there's some money for lagoon restoration projects and water quality improvements from the state and federal government. And Brevard County, did the hold my beer kind of a thing, and went ahead and passed a $500 million, not quite, sales tax.
Right.
10 years long to fund that initial push to get our lagoon where we need it to be in terms of water quality.
Right.
So oysters and clams and bivalves in general, and the natural systems that we have here, mangroves and seagrasses, they play a part in cycling nutrients naturally and removing them from the system. And so they are funded through that half-cent sales tax, the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Project Plan.
Right.
We call it the SORAL Plan because the government loves their acronyms.
Yes, they do.
So SORAL Plan, it's way too long to say the Save Our Indian River Lagoon Project Plan anytime you're talking to somebody. But a bunch of that plan is covering muck dredging, removing nutrients. It's got four pillars to the plan. We'll cover those super quick. But to remove nutrient loads that are stuck in the system, nitrogen and phosphorus that's basically stuck in the muck. Right. So muck dredging, reducing new nutrients getting into the system in the first place. That's, like you said, septic sewer, septic upgrades, stormwater pond retrofits, baffle boxes. It's like the catch-all category.
And we have, thanks to our great management here at the City of Melbourne, we have the largest baffle box this side of the Mississippi.
Yeah, it's just right up US 1.
Yep.
It's not too far from my house. So,
yeah,
it's a great thing. Keeps a bunch of plastic pollution out of the lagoon as well, which is
and that's what baffle boxes are supposed to do.
Yep.
I mean, if not to get into like weird engineering, but what it does is allows some of the sediment to fall without going over. So you have a series of boxes where the sediment's allowed to fall, the nutrients don't get into the river, only the water, ideally, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So
little compartments to catch all that stuff.
Exactly.
And they just pump it out.
And thankfully, we have some of these other mitigation efforts. But one of the last ones, again, is the oyster mats.
Yeah, so restoration is the third category, and that is restoring the ability of the lagoon, the natural systems, to remove those nutrients.
Right, and heal itself,
so to speak. Mangrove, living shorelines, mangroves and grasses that are native to the area. Oysters specifically, and then there's the option down the road. They're not funding it yet, but to
Mhm.
add clams and seagrasses when we think that there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, and some other ambitions from, because I mean it seems like there's all kinds of different nonprofits who are
Mhm.
supporting all this effort. You know, I mean, especially with the restoration, the Marine Resource Council, they're famous for, you know, having. I mean, you go there and get a rain capture system.
Yeah,
I
rain
mean,
barrel.
the
Mhm.
rain barrels. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that they're doing now, and so for homeowners here, there's a lot of options to be green. I prefer seeing, and this would be great, right? In an ideal world of seeing just the end of the use of these nutrients in general for landscaping purposes.
Yeah.
You know, phosphorus, nitrogen, heavy, you know, because the algae feeds on these things, and during a storm or anything else, they're released from the muck, again, which comes from the grass clippings,
Mhm.
falls to the bottom, and just to give people a little background, and it has nowhere to go. And so when a storm does come, or a tide or any kind of shift disturbs that muck, all those things are released, and then we start to see algae blooms, which of course have just really bad. I mean, it's toxic.
Yeah. So the things that your lawn loves to eat, the
Yes.
nitrogen and phosphorus and fertilizer, is, as you said, the same thing that algae likes to eat.
Right.
And so Brevard County did pass a fertilizer ban, an ordinance
Right.
saying that you should not be putting down fertilizer from June 1st to September 30th.
Yeah, the rainy season.
Yeah, the rainy season in
Because
Florida.
you literally apply it and it gets rinsed
And it
right
washes
off.
right
Yeah.
off. Yeah, and so we have a number of things that are working against us
Mhm.
in that regard. Is
Right.
you know, all water leads to the lagoon for the most part.
Yes.
So even if you're not near the lagoon, that storm water drain near your property is going to run right out. So it's not just the people on the canals
No.
that need to do their parts. It's everybody. That's why it's a blanket rule.
I had a neighbor and he loves his lawn, and he blew the grass clippings straight into the storm drain where it says like a little picture of the fish.
Yeah.
And like goes, you know, it, like discloses this goes right to the, and just it's a lot of education.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so going back to my ideal world, I would just love to see xeriscaping. Just, you
Yeah.
know, if everybody could just use pavers or shells or sand or anything but lawn,
Mm-hmm.
because I just feel it's archaic.
Yeah.
People think it looks great, but it's
that 1950s look that is like
it's
embodied,
it's that
in
nuclear
people's minds,
family
yeah.
kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
It's just like but like anything else, you know. You
It's
know, we
ingrained.
we don't
The
have
grass is always greener.
Yeah, white picket fence, single
Yeah,
family
yeah.
home.
you know,
green lawn.
but we're away from that. You know, we
Yeah.
don't. You know, lot of families to survive. You know, it's a 2-income family. They don't really do the lawn themselves, so it's more just like someone who comes around, like a landscaping team, and they do all of the clippings and everything else. And you know, they're not going to care maybe for where those clippings go to. You know, some people blow it back into lawn. Some other people may just leave it on the street and wait for the rain to just, you know, take it right down the drain. So it's just a very unfortunate concept. And when we're trying to see the river get revitalized and in return, I mean, I'm not sure if that's something that we could hope for. I really do, but I mean, is it? And you're not supposed to have an opinion, but I mean, is there a way? I mean, is oysters the answer in restoration?
It is a tool in our tool belt.
Right.
So, you know, we didn't get here overnight.
Mhm.
We didn't get to the point where the lagoon is unhealthy
Right.
just because there aren't as many oysters as there should be.
Sure.
It's a and problem, right?
Right.
We have muck, and we have fertilizer, and we have grass clippings, and we have septic tank. We have all these things that are contributing negatively to the lagoon's health.
Yeah.
But on the positive side, we have a lot of tools in our tool belt to address these things. So oysters are not a silver bullet.
Right.
Muck dredging isn't a silver
Exactly.
bullet. These are each pieces to address a part of the problem. So we like oysters because if you do it right, it's a one and done. You build it and it's self-sustaining. Muck dredging or something else, you've taken all those nutrients
Mhm.
out, and then they'll collect again eventually, and you got to pull them all out again.
Right.
So in theory, the oysters, you know, are sitting there filtering and doing their thing, breeding and proliferating over time, and they're just going to keep filtering and doing their wonderful oyster thing.
For someone who's never seen an oyster, Matt, it takes, because I know there's like restaurants who participate in saving
Yep.
the shells, and then it takes volunteers to then apply them and put them on like a mesh
Yeah.
blanket, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's a a bunch of different techniques that people in the industry use to do oyster restoration and put oysters out there and try and catch wild oysters and start having them grow and feed and eat algae and do all those things that we want. But the best material for them to grow on is other oyster shells. So we run the local branch of the Shuck and Share program. It's based actually out of Marine Discovery Center in New Smyrna Beach.
Cool.
They started it, and it's to take this valuable material that normally just gets thrown in the trash. So local restaurants, we have 19 local restaurants in Brevard and a shucking house that contribute shell to the program. So we go around once a week. Olivia from our team goes around in a big truck. They set their shell aside from all the folks who are eating. We collect it. We take it to a site where people won't mind the smell. And it sits there and kind of bakes in the sun and the ants and the rain and everything, clean it off. And then once it's nice and clean and nice, just, kind of not quite fossilized shell material, we'll start there. And that's the building block for all the oyster projects, ideally around the state.
And one question I get a lot is, well, do oysters just find oyster shells?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So you take that shell material, you can tie it to mats like we've done up in Mosquito Lagoon with UCF for forever. Here we'll put it in steel cages, or there's an aquaculture mesh you can use, or you can stick it in concrete. There's different concrete designs you can use. So there's a bunch of different ways, but everyone's targeting the same thing. You put out oyster shell, and they build little oyster condos. It's the best. It's the best thing, right?
That's awesome.
They're broadcast spawners, so the males and females, they shoot their gametes into the water. Not sure I can say eggs and sperm into the water, but it was biology terms. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. And so they fertilize in the water column, and they'll float around for a few weeks, and they're looking for other oysters, safety in numbers. Right. They grow in, dense patches, right? You don't want to be the one oyster there when like a sheep's head rolls by because you're done for, right? So they'll be able to find that chemical signature of shells, even if there's no live oysters present.
Nice.
And the land, they'll glue down, and then they're stuck there. That's it. They don't move again for the rest of their life. So you're 3 weeks old, 4 weeks old, and you got to pick your home for the rest of your life. A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
That is a lot of pressure.
You guys would understand better than most. You got to make this deal, and that's your forever home.
Yeah, right?
So, yeah.
Could be an oyster realtor. Jesse.
Yeah.
There's lots.
I got a great shell for you. New on the market.
Look at this man.
Super clean. Only one owner.
That's
what part of the
funny.
river are you looking for?
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, waterfront.
And then
just a lot of selling.
These are mortgage free.
Yeah, the affordable living. Where and then it's up to the homeowners who live on the rivers to participate.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting opportunity for homeowners. We have several opportunities for people throughout the county, but waterfront homeowners in particular have a different ability to impact the lagoon just because they're waterfront, right? They have the most direct connection. They have the most direct ability to positively or negatively impact.
And access.
Some
of these river homes, I mean, John, I'm sure you've seen, well, even Michelle, we'll go to these beautiful homes on the river, and they got like 100 feet of like dock. Yeah. So on like on a large dock, like how many different mats do you think that could support?
So what our technique is
I should say pier, not really a dock.
Yeah. And can it be like, does it have to be on the main canal, or can it be down any waterway?
It depends.
Brackish?
Okay. Yeah. So there's a few constraints. Obviously, oysters are an estuarian species, so they do like the brackish water. Right. They don't mind a little hint of fresh, but we can't like build in Creighton Creek. It's too fresh, right? Okay. Right. Or Turkey Creek. Once you're out of the mouth, it's too fresh. So we are looking for certain water quality. We are looking for certain flow. Okay. They're stationary. They're a filter feeder, so if their food doesn't come to them,
they don't eat.
That's it. Right. So canals are pretty tough for them for that reason. Okay. Just not a lot of water flow there for them.
So they need a current.
So some current. So more open lagoon is better. There's plenty of algae for them to eat in most places, as you'd expect if you look at the water.
Rivers?
Yeah. So
any boat ramps, piers, docks along the rivers?
Yeah. Any open water section of the lagoon is generally good. Now we do try and target areas where we have a few more oysters that are looking for homes, more baby oysters in the water column looking to attach. And so that tends to be on kind of the southern half of the county. So south of Pineda, and then kind of 520 being, we don't see very many oysters north of that. having my property be considered
Right.
to host an oyster reef, or hey, I'm interested in mangroves and marsh grasses as well. We'll do the whole shebang, right? We'll do
Right.
mangroves and grasses and oysters. We'll just get it all, the whole
Right.
suite of natural elements. And the zoo would come out and evaluate the property so they can have an idea of if it's going to be suitable. We don't want to put tax dollars out there and not
Sure.
have it work.
Right.
So after that, it gets proposed to the county. They choose to fund it or not. It's
Okay.
another great thing is that they have it set up so it's not just the county commissioners.
Right.
It's also a citizen oversight committee. So it's
Exactly.
dual approval process of both local folks with an vested interest,
Sure.
and also our political leaders. So it goes through 2 levels of approval. If it gets approved, then we have funding in hand, and we'll do the whole process for the homeowner. So their piece of that, getting it for free, which is great for them,
Right.
is that they are allowing us to put it on their property, giving access to waterfront. That would be very expensive for the county to purchase a bunch of waterfront, right?
Of course. Right.
To put in these projects. So it's kind of a win-win. The benefits, the water quality improvements benefit everybody
Right.
around them, but it's located on their property. So then the zoo comes in and does, the permitting, the design, all that fun stuff, and the install.
Wow.
And they get a free project.
And what kind of cost is associated with creating?
So collecting those shells is not free.
Right.
The restaurants are kind enough to
Donate.
them, and the Tourist Development Council, Brevard County TDC, has supported the Shuck and Share program in the past, which helps defray that cost. But driving around the length of Brevard County is, as you'd imagine, it's a fair amount of gas and
Gas
staff
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just the first stage in the process.
Right.
We have to collect those materials, put them in some kind of building block
Right.
to move them out into the lagoon. We can't just dump buckets of shell randomly in the lagoon and be like, good luck.
You're right.
That's not how the
And
permits
folks,
work,
yeah,
unfortunately.
please don't do that either.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
do that.
Don't think you're getting keeping your leftovers from Squid Lips and they're like, I'll just take it. Here, let me put it in my purse and then dump it out. So it's got to be a thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we call it the quarantine process.
Okay.
We want to make sure the oysters you eat at a restaurant locally, they're not from the area.
Right.
They're from the Panhandle. They're from Texas. They're from Virginia. They will not be from Brevard County. They
Right.
will not be from the Indian River Lagoon. So we don't want to introduce any potential pathogens. So we have a very strict.
Is that why there's only 19 restaurants? It seems like there'd be a lot more restaurants that served oysters.
Well, they have to choose to be in it. It is some work for them and some
Right.
training for their staff to participate. So we, it's an opt-in program. We're not hounding folks to get involved, but we certainly want everyone's oyster shell if they would give it to us.
Sure.
So yeah, it's grown every year. When we first started, we were just getting from the shucking house and one Red Lobster in Melbourne, and it's grown in basically the past 2.5 years to 19 restaurants, and we'll probably add another 5 in the next year or so.
Nice.
So yeah.
Well, for those listening, now's your opportunity. Call Jake.
Yeah, if you own a restaurant or a manager in a restaurant and you serve oysters and you have those shells, we want them.
Yes.
Join us.
Yeah. No kidding.
We'll come pick them up once a week. It's not too much hassle for you. Just got to set them aside for us.
Exactly. And that's just like anything else. So once the mats are then prepared,
Yep.
and the permits pulled, and now they're essentially gone ahead and are actively doing their job.
Yep.
How much water can an oyster filter?
So the big talking point was always 50 gallons a day.
Mm-hmm.
Probably an overestimate, maybe a gracious math that was done there.
Right.
Oysters can get full. That's a pretty big oyster, filtering for 24 hours a day, 7
Right.
days a week, So 50 gallons a day was the old talking point. It's probably more in the range like maybe 25 to 30 gallons a day, but that's one oyster.
Right.
And
Wow,
there's
that's a
usually
lot.
not like one oyster when you see oysters. There's
Sure.
dozens within, a few inches.
Mm-hmm.
So the cumulative benefits are still great, even if they don't filter quite as much as we.
Well, I think
thought
I think it was that one marketing image where you put an oyster in a very algae kind of aquarium, and then the next day it was like clear.
Yeah, you can YouTube it. There's a bunch of great filtration videos out there. Yeah.
But but the river is such a big basin and it goes all the way to St. John's and Mosquito, and all the way
Yep.
down all the way to I think Jupiter. Like, I mean, it's just such a long.
The IRL
lagoon.
goes from Jupiter Inlet to Ponce Inlet.
Yeah.
So 5 counties, like a little tiny bit of a 6th county down there in the south.
Right.
Now, when I said that oysters are not the end-all be-all,
Sure.
the goal in the county's plan there is 20 miles of oyster reef, which is a lot.
20 miles of oyster reef was a lot.
14 acres or something of oyster reef over the life of the funding source. But that calculation is only going to filter the volume of the lagoon maybe once a year. So that's an improvement, certainly, from where we're at, but that's not enough. So that's why I said this is a piece of a bigger plan. So if you look at the pie chart on the funding of the county's plan, the oyster and living shoreline piece is about 3% of the total funding. So this is a small piece in the big picture, but it's one that most of the homeowners might have an opportunity to participate with.
And who would they contact as a homeowner if they're interested?
Well, they can hop on our website, restoreourshores.org. So that's the Brevard Zoo's restoration program within our conservation department. So they can go right there, and there's a volunteer tab, and it has all the sign-up sheets. If you want to grow the baby oysters that get put on these projects, this is another opportunity. So if you live in a canal and it might not be suitable for a permanent home for an oyster reef, you can grow them, and they will grow just fine up in the water column. You get to babysit them and clean the cage a little bit, make sure they're all happy, and then they go in kind of their forever home on a reef when we build it. So all those sign-up sheets are there. We have a project funded through St. John's right now for clam restoration as well.
Wow.
So that gives us an opportunity to do work in more areas than are just suitable for oysters. Like I was saying, in the north end of the county, gets a little bit more challenging for oysters. Great clam habitat. Nice and salty, a lot less tributaries, a little bit more wave energy. Clams dig it up there.
Yeah.
So if you're in Titusville or Cocoa, Port St. John, Port Canaveral, all those areas, pretty good clam habitat. So we have a grant right now, and we are looking for 100 different properties, for people to, again, get a free project that's going to benefit the lagoon.
Well, here you go. I mean, Space Coast, Brevard County residents, there's your invitation to get involved and, do a little bit more than just have a pier or an extension of your property out into the river. Now you could absolutely help your home, and I'm not sure if that helps with appreciation for your property, but if someone really, really loves fishing and wants to be a part of that and have that legacy of hosting oysters, certainly they may pick your home over the other neighbor who doesn't. So you never know.
Yeah, if you're a fisherman, I mean, when you're out on your boat doing some backwater fishing and inshore stuff, you go to the mangrove fringe, right?
Right.
You don't necessarily fish along the seawall. You look for some structure, natural or not. That's where the fish are. So if you build an oyster reef, that adds a ton of structure that all the little critters are hanging out in.
Exactly.
The little crabs, the little shrimp, the little fish. And that attracts, as you'd expect, the
fish.
bigger fish.
Right.
So,
well, especially the drum family, your redfish, your sheep's head, because these are guys who actually forage on the bottom and they have strong jaws that crack through shells and completely, just love where you're at. So, if you love snook, redfish, mangroves are some of the best habitat ever.
Yeah. So this is something that we've lost, unfortunately, over time. We have 61% of our shoreline is armored in some way, so that's coquina shorelines or seawalls, and so we've lost some of that natural infrastructure that grows the fish that we like to eat and the crabs that we like to hunt for.
Exactly.
So,
but there is a movement with the living shoreline, and I was actually had a unique opportunity to provide music and as people who know me, that's kind of what I do. I DJ and MC different events, and we had Tortoise Island hosted a living shoreline event, and of course, we all came out. The MRC, Indian River Lagoon, like everybody who's anybody. Brevard Zoo was there and showed everybody like how to fish responsibly, all the way to how to create a mat, and I think they even had some live mats and where you could participate and getting away, because a lot of those sloping backyards just end right into it just disappears. It's like like an infinite pool just disappears over the lead. There's like an infinite lawn that just disappeared right into the lagoon. And guess what? All that runoff, of course, it's beautiful green lawn, right into the river. So what they were encouraging people is to add a native shoreline, with some kind of grass or something else to capture. And you add some pebbles and some rocks and some shells. That way, it doesn't go all the way to the river. Right, it falls into the sand or the sediment and is actually captured before it goes all the way. Do you guys have anything to do with that program?
We do living shoreline. So
Right.
if you have a fairly natural shoreline, kind of the sandy slope up into your uplands, the dry part of your property, we do mangrove and marsh grass plantings.
Wow,
so
really?
We do that as well.
Okay.
Marine Resources Council does also.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a couple
Yeah.
organizations.
They and us would probably be the two
Okay.
biggest ones in the area for those types of projects. If you go further north out of the county into Volusia or further south, there's some other nonprofits and other
Sure.
groups that do the work. And then bioswales and some of the other stuff you're talking about, like that stormwater buffer.
Right. No, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's like a buffer planting where you're just trying to slow that water down and capture those nutrients and sediments before they get into the lagoon. Satellite Beach has a program for that. We're looking into a grant opportunity for that as well to make it more accessible to homeowners, because there are plenty of people who are interested in this but don't have the expertise or don't know what plants to pick and aren't sure what the design might be. And there's not exactly a cottage industry in the landscaping community right now for this. There should be.
I wish
there
there was.
should be.
Yeah.
But we're trying to see if there's an opportunity there to make it a bit more accessible to homeowners. So that might happen later this year, maybe next year.
So if you had a homeowner that was interested in that, but maybe whatever reason they weren't necessarily interested in planting or doing the work, who does that kind of work? Is that volunteers or their paid staff that come in and do the plantings and things, or is that something that can use volunteers for? I'm
not sure how many of the municipalities have something similar. I believe Satellite Beach's program is reimbursement based. So if you pay to have someone do it, a landscaping contractor or somebody, or do it yourself, Satellite Beach will reimburse you a certain dollar value on the size of the project. We're trying to expand that with a potential grant to say, the plants will be covered, the design, the install will be covered. You just basically have to we're trying to make this as easy and accessible as possible.
So who's installing it now? Is it primarily the homeowner then?
Yeah, for most of these would be. If you're doing living shoreline, something funded through the county, it's usually whoever's put in for that contract with the county through the sorrel plan. So the zoo or MRC would come in and do the whole install and the plant selection and everything, permitting if needed and all that fun stuff. And then that's great because, again, the homeowner just kind of gets to show up.
I was just trying to think of something, if there's somebody that lives on the mainland that doesn't have shorefront property but would like to get involved.
Yeah, there are some smaller landscaping companies that do more of that work where they focus on natives and focus on stuff like you were discussing that doesn't need to be babied quite as much with fertilizer and pesticides or herbicides, whatever you need to do to kind of keep the pretty exotics happy. There's some really nice native, exotics looking plants that you can get.
And absolutely. And not only that, but the natives attract your butterflies and all of your other natural insects. This is the habitat that they're used to as well. So if you like seeing, again, all kinds of different butterflies in your yard and everything else, plant just some native vegetation and they will come. And not only that, but they don't need fertilizer. This is where they're supposed to grow, so they grow freely just with the rain, the soil, and the sunlight. That's the only things that these plants have grown for millennia. So it's like, if you plant them again, they know what to do.
Yeah, happy in drought during the drought part of the year, happy during rainy season.
Yep.
And then you get the zebra longwings and the Gulf fritillaries and the monarchs and all the fun little butterflies that we have locally.
I'm glad I have a guy from the zoo who knows all the species of butterflies and everything else. John, you've been quiet, and I've been talking so much, so you have anything to add?
Yeah, I want to learn more about seagrass because I've heard horrible stories about like manatees passing away due to starvation and.
Yeah, so this is a pretty bad year to be a manatee. So they just declared an unusual mortality event in Florida, particularly on our side, the East Coast. And that means that there is a higher than normal rate of manatee deaths. And the big indicator from FWC, who does the necropsies, who looks at the animals when they've passed away, is that they're underweight, they're emaciated, they're starving. So that's not good. It's a little odd because we really lost a good chunk of our seagrass in 2011 during the first big algae bloom we had, where it kind of bloomed across the whole section of Brevard County, the super bloom.
That was the big fish kill, right?
Yeah, that was a big fish kill that year. We had when we had another in 2016, and we've had algae blooms not quite every year since then. 2012, 2013, 2014, we had some brown tide starting then.
Yeah, I remember that.
We had a little gap in 2015. 2016, we got hit hard again, and that was the other big fish kill. And then that was kind of the push for the sorrel plan. People got to see firsthand what happens when the lagoon is going in the wrong direction. And that kind of pushed us to pass that funding. So, yeah, tough year for the manatees. I think the state is kind of running around like crazy right now, trying to figure out what can be done. I know FWC is working hard.
Is it still going in the wrong direction, or is it starting to go in the right direction?
It is mixed. There's not an easy answer. So the lagoon's pretty big, right? So the Indian River Lagoon's 156 miles long.
There's a lot of components to that answer.
Yeah. So for us, what we should see is, I think Brevard County had like 45,000 acres of seagrass, and that was a couple different species that we had locally. There's like 4 of the main species. There's 7 in the IRL. 7 seagrass species.
How do they determine that?
St. John's does aerial mapping, and then they do ground truthing. So they look at density of the bed, like how many plants are in, a square meter or whatever. And then they do aerial mapping to get kind of the big coverage. So they do that every 2 years. And they had the 2009, we hit peak seagrass. We hit the amount of seagrass at their oldest aerial maps from the 40s, from the early flyovers from like Patrick, where they thought we had about 45,000 acres. We hit that in 2009, and then we just tanked right after that, which is pretty tough. And a little bit of recovery in 2013, and we've kind of just been eking along every 2 years since. So the 2019 map came out last year. They do the survey in 19 and they publish it in 20, and we're still kind of struggling. We have seen a little bit more seagrass in some areas, and a species that we're not as used to seeing down south has kind of been moving up because we had a really dry winter and dry spring. So it's happy. It's migrating up. The water's been moderately clear after that algae bloom this last winter kind of wrapped up.
Is that food for the manatees as well?
It is.
Good.
But it's a tiny seagrass.
Oh.
When we think of the ones that manatees like, they like the big, long, stringy ones. There's a bunch of species that make this really long blade and get this really dense canopy of seagrass and really fill in and make a bed. If you've ever snorkeled in the Keys and like the turtle grass, where it's just this meadow of grass as far as you can see. The species that we have that is present right now just doesn't grow that big or that dense. It's just kind of it's there. It's some seagrass, so we're happy about that, but it's not enough to feed the manatees and recover to where we need it to be. But it's something. It might be a step in the right direction. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a tough time for the.
So can you go out and
manatees.
just like play with this grass? I mean.
So funny story. We started a project to look into that. Basically, one of the mechanisms of seagrass, they do fertilize and have seeds underwater, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
So they can spread by seeds, but actually one of the main mechanisms for a lot of them is when manatees or something is foraging, they break off fragments and they float around, and then they'll land again and reroute, and that helps them colonize new areas. And then they just grow like normal and expand. So we can collect those floating fragments and then replant them to kind of start little pioneer beds. Nice. So we started a project with that during COVID. So that was an interesting project, but we still got some volunteers involved. Some of the teens from the zoo got to come out with us and help monitor that project. The big problem is that the water quality is still pretty bad.
Yeah.
So there's everyone, including the state and the county, is very hesitant about spending $1 million, $5 million on a big seagrass project, and then that summer we have an algae bloom, and there's no light getting to the bottom, and the seagrass dies because they're a plant. They need light to photosynthesize. Exactly. So it's everyone's moving cautiously, trying to.
Seems like a big risk.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of groups involved though: FWC, the zoo, St. John's River Water Management District, Harbor Branch down south, that are looking at ways to do this in kind of smaller, cost-effective ways, so that if we think that we can, have good confidence that it's going to survive, we'll plant a whole bunch.
Right. It seems like none of it's an easy task. It's all very daunting, and it takes lots of organizations to make it happen.
Yeah, in the lagoon's complex. I mean, we were talking before we got started today about how the lagoon flows and the inlet question that people have, and it's just there's not always an easy answer, unfortunately.
Well, it's because it's so long.
Yeah.
And there are so many issues.
And it's constantly changing, too, just with weather. We've been dry.
Yep.
So that affects the climate and the environment of the water.
I'm sure storms and hurricanes can affect the...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so the lagoon is very, I don't want to say finicky. That's not the right term. It's very dynamic. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a system that's meant to be dynamic, right? You have the mix of the fresh water, you have the mix of the salt water that makes it, a brackish water system.
Yeah.
And then, a hurricane comes and changes the whole water level and dumps a bunch of fresh water.
Yeah.
And then right after that, late season hurricane, we go into dry season and the whole lagoon evaporates down and concentrates the salt, and we get real salty for a bit. Yeah, it's a very interesting place to work.
Indian River Lagoon, St. John's, and all these other connecting tributaries, because we have a bunch of fresh water from St. John's, and there's tributaries coming from the northern end of the county and everything else, and you also have even like Lake Washington and some other big bodies of water not too far inland.
Yeah.
And there's again, when those areas get too high during the wet season, guess where it goes? All the way to the lagoon. The lagoon has a little bit to where to go. And it is just a constant changing, but it's also been recognized as one of the most vibrant, diverse ecosystems in the country. So I think it's our opportunity to help out. And so, giving a call to action to any of the residents here, any volunteers that want to go to the Brevard Zoo, we've already given them a way to do that. We're gonna make sure we remind them, because you don't have to live on the river to do your part. Okay. Again, it's an action call to all the restaurants, that serve oysters. They could become part of the program, and it's really just people with a shoreline, to
or anyone that wants to help.
Yeah, but if it's the buffer, if it's planting natives and getting rid of your lawn, I mean, there's so many opportunities for people, and I think that's the point of today's episode, is to let people know that there is an option. There are ways for you to participate. But let's go back to the zoo, and is there any summer programs that people can come to? I mean,
Yes.
is there always a mat building operation going on, or is it specifically certain times?
So it's seasonal.
Okay.
So if you want to come to the zoo and learn about animals and learn about nature and getting outside, our education department has some great programs. They are filling up quick.
Good.
The virtual ones have a more gracious capacity, we'll say.
Yeah.
So check that out. You can find all that info on the brevardzoo.org website. If you want to get your hands dirty and come out and volunteer with us, there's an opportunity for every age and ability level. If you have a green thumb, or even like maybe not so green thumb, you can grow mangroves with us through the Adopt a Mangrove project. Take the little babies home.
I did that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Grow them up. They grow crazy slow, but many groups, including us, have found if you put the little babies out, there's a reason there's tons of little baby mangroves floating around, because not many of them are going to make it.
Right.
So it's an adaptive strategy there. So if we can grow them nice and big, then we'll plant them and they have a lot better chance of surviving.
Exactly.
So you can do that. You can grow baby oysters with us with the oyster gardening project. You can come and volunteer to do the sweat equity, the labor of building our materials. We do that in the cool months on purpose,
right?
Because it's tough work out in the sun and heat, bagging up oyster shells.
Right.
And then, of course, we need hands to put all this stuff in the water. So that is a little more focused on the summertime because that's when we build our projects in the lagoon because that's oyster breeding season.
What about the boating community? Can the boating community help out in any way?
Yeah,
People with boats?
Of course. We have been targeting most of our oyster reef builds and our plantings in areas where we can get to it by vehicle, and we do contract a barge when we need to bring in a lot of materials into a spot that's maybe not as accessible. But in the past and potentially again soon in the future, we're going to be working on sites that are not as accessible. And so if there's folks with boats who want to volunteer their time and their captain abilities,
I would.
Then we'd love to have that as well. In particular for some of the clam projects, they're not as material heavy. We're taking a couple buckets of clams out and spreading them out and kind of staking them in place. So those are material light, we'll say, compared to the oyster reef where we're bringing out 1,000 bags of oyster shell. So that's a great opportunity for somebody who's got a boat that wants to come out with us and plan a few sites.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And then any final closing thoughts regarding the populations of fish? We already talked about manatees, but is there anything else that we need to do? Or is there a moratorium? I know, we encourage fishermen to only bag what is in a slot, and so forth. But are we seeing a decline in other river species or maybe an improvement?
Well, it's different, right? So, back in the day, maybe 10 years ago, people came here for spotted sea trout. They came here for redfish.
Yes.
And those are seagrass dependent species. And
well, that's where their legs,
Yeah.
They would lay the eggs, and that was the it's not the breeding ground, but it's the fertility ground.
It is, yeah. So seagrass meadows and mangrove forests are great nursery habitat.
Nursery, that's what I was looking for.
For all the all the little species, the small game fish before they get big.
Sure.
I mean, snook love mangrove creeks and all that. Tarpon go into the mosquito impoundments and the mangrove creeks and stormwater pond, all that stuff.
Right.
So check the regulations, obviously. I mean, all fishermen know that one.
Or else FWC will be all over you.
Yes.
Yeah, FWC will get you. But just kind of understand that what you're fishing for has probably changed. If you fished here in the 90s and the early 2000s,
we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, there was oyster beds and clam beds everywhere, and you could just go and rake them up like Easter eggs. And now they're not here.
Yeah, so FWC did some mapping in the early 2000s, and this blows the mind. They went out to map where the clams were and weren't to look at what made this good clam habitat, so they could make the shellfish harvesting areas for recreation and commercial guys. And they found like 200 clams, in a 1 square meter. You're talking like a 3 foot by 3 foot section. They found like 200 clams in like 2004.
Right.
When UF Whitney Lab, Dr. Todd Osborne's team went out to collect the clams that started the super clam project, the IRL clam restoration that we're doing with them, they put 1,000 man hours in and found like 39 in like the whole north part of the lagoon, because the whole system's different. Right. So we've had some changes. It's not to say that we can't recover, and we're trying our best. The National Estuary Program, the Indian River Lagoon Council, the state, the county, and a bunch of our nonprofit partners are really doing our best. And anything you can do to help, taking that little action, whatever it is, not fertilizing, getting a rain barrel, planting a shoreline, just volunteering, that's all great. That's a step, an incremental step in the right direction for us.
Another quick question, talking about the chemicals and stuff, not just with the lawn fertilizers, but I've also heard a lot with just the cleaning products within the home, laundry detergents, soaps, things like that go into, obviously probably more like those with septic tanks. So what are some things that homeowners can do there?
Well, so first off, if you're on sewer, you don't get a free pass.
Right.
The wastewater treatment plants are processing that for you, and you're paying for it. So understand that all that water gets used again. So just because it goes to a wastewater treatment plant and gets treated, they use that reclaimed water to irrigate medians and stuff. That still makes its way back into the lagoon. It just takes a longer route.
Right.
If you have a septic tank, get it serviced on a regular schedule. The point of a septic system is for public health. It's to remove potential pathogens, E. coli and stuff that's going to make people sick. It is not to remove nutrients.
No.
Which is why that one little patch where the septic tank is like the greenest part of the lawn, because it's just leaching nutrients like crazy. So septic tanks were built for a different purpose than removing nutrients. So get them regularly maintained. And if you live very close to the lagoon, proximity matters, the county found. If you're
like 200 feet, I believe.
Yeah, 200 feet contributes some portion, within, whatever it is. 50 feet contributes like a bunch.
Right.
But if you're more than 200 feet from the lagoon, your septic tank, even if it's pretty broken, is not contributing nearly as much as someone with a pretty decent septic tank right near the water.
Right.
That groundwater, that
is leaching.
That sheet flow of water when it rains just pulls all those nutrients and dumps them in.
Yeah, because I believe there's now a moratorium on the regular septic design, and now you need more of a
aerator.
I think it's temporary,
design.
right? So it's not a ban; it's a moratorium. It's a temporary pause on new construction within a certain proximity to the lagoon. And the thinking is that they'll probably up the expectations on how good your system needs to be. So there's some they call them advanced septic systems. They filter out 60% of the nitrogen and phosphorus, something like that.
Wow,
which is notably better than the 0 or 5% that the conventional septic does.
Right.
So it's a step in the right direction, but again, where
so
possible, we want.
I've heard there's some grants to either get new septic tanks or possibly to get in, routed onto the city sewer.
Yeah, so that's through the Sorrel plan as well. The county's Save Our Indian River Lagoon plan. And it's based on the cost, right?
Right.
So if you're more than 200 feet away, it's not really worth the cost of upgrading that system.
Right.
So if you're close, they'll do septic upgrades in some instances, and where cost effective, they'll put a sewer line in. That's the best option, but that's very expensive. So they need a certain density of people and a line nearby that they can tap into.
Right.
If you ever want a 200-page read, I encourage you to check out the county's plan, because it's quite in depth and goes through the whole decision science of how do we spend our money effectively, so that we're not just throwing money into a pit that is the lagoon and hoping that we fixed it.
And not for nothing, when it does sunset now, and we're getting closer. I think
26 or 27, something like that.
So when it sunsets and we evaluate, okay, did any of that effort help?
Yeah.
And if the data shows that maybe it didn't, then we're probably not going to continue it, and it's just going to go into more despair until again there's another event. Like a big algae bloom, and then everybody gets excited about it, and then we go through another bill or legislation to tax. But I really hope that after the 10 years, we could see some really good positive data and go, you know what, guys, it's just a half a cent. Now now it's not a true like half a penny, but it's a 0.5%. So it's still a tax on your purchasing. But if people are confident, absolutely confident, no question about it, it works, then I know me as a taxpayer would have no problem doing it. And I think
I agree.
I think the general census as well, like, wow, we found something that works. Well, let's continue the dredging. Let's continue the oyster mats. Let's continue
our tax
the living
money is
shoreline.
actually working on something.
Wow. So
that's why we have oversight.
It's benefiting.
For perspective, so the EPA program, the National Estuary Program, that helps manage this whole water body across all these counties and all these different municipalities, I want to say their annual budget is like $3 or $4 million for like the whole lagoon.
That's not a lot.
Let's call it 5.
Right.
With us, with this funding source that we've set aside for ourselves, that is a tax that we've taken on and a gift to ourselves.
Right.
Because that money only goes into Brevard Waters.
Right.
And that's what, $48 million on average a year for 10 years. If we got every bit of funding from the National Estuary Program, it probably wouldn't be enough. So we gotta be putting in some local dollars here as well.
Well, it's also improving our value for our properties.
Oh yeah.
As far as real estate's concerned.
Well, nobody wants waterfront property on a dead body of water.
Or
looks like chocolate milk or pea soup or
smells.
Yeah.
Smells
dead fish.
And not for nothing, there are retention ponds,
right,
which are not waterfront, which are, it's just a place for, stormwater to go to so it doesn't flood your house. But, even things will survive in there. You'll see lily pads. You'll see a whole little ecosystem happening in just any of these new communities that are going up. And, it's a mitigation effort. It's just like, well, you could say you got waterfront property, but it's really just the developer needing to have, somewhere for the water to go.
Control.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but again, the turtles, they'll find it. The snakes, the gators, the birds, they will find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still habitat. It's still good
habitat,
stuff.
right.
Right.
Yeah. We have a real opportunity
Right.
In the next few years to make progress.
Exactly.
I think we are moving in the right direction. The seagrass might not show it yet.
Right.
But if we have a couple good years where there's lots of light getting to the bottom, where we have nice sandy bottom, where we've done the muck dredging, where we've done some of that hard work, man, it'll bounce back quick. I think you'll be surprised. I'm really, really confident, when 2027 we'll say, okay, we're moving in the right direction. Things are getting better. And I hope that encourages us to keep, the effort going and not just say, all right, we did it.
Nature has a way of correcting itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just hope that the efforts that were planned and mapped out, again, now like going on its 4th, 5th year, I really hope by that it catches up with all the population that's also contributing to even more of the same, right?
Yeah.
I mean, more and more communities, more and more building, more and more of everything, right? Because a lot of times it'll encroach on wetlands and other parts that, not for nothing, are able to, again, heal itself and maintain some kind of homeostasis. But as soon as we go in with the bulldozers and start moving, sand around and habitats are moved and trees and everything
Building
else,
seawalls and
all of it combined. So I'm wondering if a 5-year-old plan had the foresight, the amount of whatever crystal ball that they were able to have at the time, and go, well, guys, does this sustain even with a 2 or 3 or even 4% population growth year over year over year, until it sunsets, so is it aggressive enough is what I'm saying, so I guess we can only learn that after, someone says, well, we grew by, 20,000 more people, 1,500 more homes, and we're still able to maintain, some positive, a result, then man, I think that, we'll be way ahead of ourselves and hopefully into a really good direction.
Yeah, so the number I heard thrown around pre-COVID was that 900 people a day were moving to Florida.
Yes.
So that's not only Brevard County.
Right, it's spread out.
But the space industry seems to be pretty booming.
Absolutely.
Our engineering firms seem to be doing quite well. So I'm imagining that we're getting a decent, proportion of those 900 a day people.
That number may have gone up.
Actually, during COVID, it probably could have.
Yeah.
You guys would probably know better than me on that.
That number has gone up.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So there are things that we can control here in our county, with the sorrel plan, and there's things we can't. So, the state and the feds have to do their part as well. We all got to, be pitching in. One of the benefits of how the plan was built was that it is adaptable, though, to your comment of, we make a plan in 2016 and then in 2027 when it's finished up, did we stay on the right path?
Right.
So each year they look at the projects that they've funded, the projects that are pending, and how much money that they have contracted out and what they expect to come in.
Right.
And they reevaluate. And both the county commissioners and the Citizen Oversight Committee can make recommendations and changes to the plan. So we had a big, I'll call it a realignment. In the first 2 years, we had a huge pot of money stuck in muck dredging. Yeah.
Yes.
And people were not interested in spending, $200-300 million, whatever it was, just on muck dredging. And so they reallocated a bunch of that funding into other programs that would have more spread out. It'd be a little bit more equitable across the length of the county instead of just a few big muck deposits getting dredged, like Galley River and up by the borrow pits by 520 and all that. And so each year it gets reassessed to make sure we are spending our money effectively, which I appreciate as a taxpayer.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, this has been plenty insightful it's so glad to get an update from Brevard Zoo, a really big not only amenity here in Brevard County. It is an attraction in itself. And because you guys are doing over and beyond with rehabilitating sea life to also contributing to any effort to help the Indian River Lagoon, it's just from all of us, thank you so much for the efforts.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Yeah, super inspiring. I hope
nice.
It inspires people to want to get involved like it has inspired me to want to get involved.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a great place to live, and so we're happy to be in this community. We have a great opportunity here.
Yeah, but it's up to all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes effort, and for people, because I know it when it comes around the algae bloom, almost everybody has an opinion. But when things are good, and right now we're at a pretty good homeostasis. You think fish are jumping, dolphins are rolling, and it's the sun goes up and down. But at the end of the day, how much are you really excited about it? Except when you get these inflammatory headlines dead manatees and fish kills and everything else. So I really hope the listener find one yourself, guys, and
get involved.
Whatever you can do, even if it's just taking half your lawn and dedicating it to natives. I mean, seriously, whatever it takes. If you live canal front or on the river, you have a unique opportunity. To also keep an eye on your shorelines.
Very impactful.
Yeah.
And the most benefit to gain.
Exactly.
That's it too. Yeah.
Exactly. Imagine going just off your dock and bring your grandkid and throwing the line in, and immediately you're lining up with some beautiful Florida fish, and not for nothing, but if it's a keeper, enjoy your dinner. And I mean, it'd be nice to be able to
clean river.
Yeah, right. It'd be really nice to harvest a meal without being worried about where it comes from or anyway, it's just it just be nice to bring back that nostalgia, of just enjoying a really nice river.
I think we would all look forward to being able to walk out into the lagoon and collect a bucket of clams.
Yeah,
again.
that'd be great.
That'd be awesome.
Have a clam bake on one of the spoil islands.
Right.
Yeah.
Just live that Florida lifestyle.
Yeah, that was in the 80s, and we were on one of the spoiled islands, and they were just surrounded by clams and oysters everywhere.
Yeah, and again, it's you can't go blame generations of the past for overfishing or anything else. That's not the story anymore. The story is now we have the opportunity to do it ourselves and make this generation the generation that improves it for
our kids.
Exactly.
Kids, right. And everybody can get involved in some way or another.
So I'm gonna go ahead and fade us out and say goodbye. But before that, Jake, how can people contact you and get involved one last time?
Yeah, so go to the Restore Our Shores website. So that's www.restoreourshores.org. And under the volunteer tab, there's a bunch of opportunities where you can sign up for. Stay in touch, join our newsletter, and come check out the zoo. Support us that way as well. We love that.
Awesome. And this has been another episode of the Space Coast Real Estate Show. Thanks so much for tuning in, and make sure to go back and listen to our previous episodes. And, of course, like the Facebook page, and you won't miss another episode coming up. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.